So in this video, I'm going to cover everything you need to solve student notes questions on the SAT. Here's the thing about these student notes questions. They may seem like they're just something that appears at the end of every reading module, just some extra thing you have to do and just get it out of the way so you can finish the module. But in actuality, that's not the case at all. Actually, the thing with the student notes questions on the SAT is these are questions that are completely different from every other question on the reading and writing modules in terms of how you solve them, obviously how they're designed, and everything else about them. And if you're approaching these questions the same way you're approaching the other reading questions on the SAT, you're going to be doing them wrong and your accuracy and timing is going to be a lot worse than it could be otherwise. So in this video, I'm going to cover exactly how to approach these questions and how to do them to maximize your chance of getting them right. If you want to know why you should trust me, I've scored a 760 on the SAT reading and writing section. I've also helped hundreds of students improve their scores before, and also a lot of people with this specific question type because so many people bring it up to me as a thing they're really struggling with. So student notes questions, they of course look like this. You have notes on like the left side and then a question that's asking you about them. You should solve these questions using the following 3-step process. First, you read the question and try to see what it's actually asking for. And make sure you really understand what it's asking for as well. Don't just like read it and just like kind of understand it. Make sure you actually fully get it. Then check the choices and see which one actually achieves the goal for the question. So whatever it's asking you for in step 1, see which choice actually does that thing in step 2. Now, at this point, you can hopefully just select the answer and move on. But if it's an especially confusing or complicated question, or if the choices just don't make sense, or if they're really similar, or anything that just seems kind of off, you can then at that point look at the actual notes themselves and see if they can give you kind of any extra guidance, any extra information to solve the question. Now, if you've watched the other videos on the channel, you would know that this is completely different from every other question I've talked about so far, because typically what I always say is read the passage, then predict an answer, then select which one best matches the answer. This is different in that you don't actually have to read the passage first. This is really something you should never do on any other reading question on the SAT except for these. And the reason why you can do it on these is because the notes themselves typically don't have that important of information. Typically, it's going to be the case where you can just look at the question and there's really only going to be one of these choices that actually answers what the question is asking for. So you can just go for that one. But again, don't allow this to be something that you do on every single reading question. If you're doing this for other questions, you're going to be getting them wrong because you do need to be reading these stuff on the other question types for sure. So that's really it. Besides that, it just comes down to making sure you're familiar with these different question types and actually able to apply it. So let me go through a few examples so you can really understand this for a second. So first, let's identify what the goal of this question is. The student wants to write a sentence that both defines a seiche and briefly describes how it forms in large lakes. One really useful thing you can do at this step is try to actually rephrase what it's asking for in your mind. If you know from my other video, this is actually what I say to do for the passages in passage questions. And if you think about it, it's actually kind of a similar thing because it's like, in a way, this is the passage for a question like this because this is the thing that gives us the majority of the information we're basing our stuff off of. So that's just kind of an interesting thing. But yeah, if I was trying to explain this in my own words, I would say we're trying to essentially explain what a seiche is, like say seiche is X. And then we also want to explain how it forms. So what actually happens in nature to make a seiche appear? Is it just something with like water? Does there have to be like some human involved? Whatever. What actually makes it form? Now for student notes questions, these questions can be asking for a bunch of different things. Here are some of the things that I commonly see in different student notes questions as for what they're asking for. So it could be like summarizing a research study, comparing two things, showing that one thing causes another, emphasizing when something happens, describing a methodology like for a research study. You could support a claim, just provide evidence for some statement, define a concept, kind of like what it's asking for in this one, or provide an example. So I'm not going to give you an example of literally all of these different things just because the only way to actually understand each of these is really by doing a question on them. You can't just memorize this different list of things and hope that's going to help you with the student notes questions. You have to really do questions, and by doing that, you're going to understand how to approach each of these different things. So back to this question now, we're looking in step 2 to see which one of these both defines the seiche and then explains how it forms. And once we find that thing, we can just select it and then we're done. Nothing really else we have to do there. One important thing for this process is you should really have it in your mind. You're trying to find the best answer choice for a question like this. Again, this is completely different from what I say for passage questions where you're just trying to find the least wrong answer. And so the difference between those two is that when you look through these choices, you're basically trying to think there may be several ones that are kind of okay, but which one really is the best? Which one really achieves the goal the best out of all 4 of the choices? And that's what's going to be your right answer. The period of a seiche varies with a lake's length, depth, and shape, making each lake's oscillation unique. So that does not define a seiche at all. And it also doesn't even really mention how it forms. So it doesn't really do either things here. So A would be wrong. If I was to try to eliminating some choices, I would definitely eliminate A. B. Strong winds create waves and lakes that may slosh back and forth for hours, even days at a time. This might seem okay on the surface, but you might notice here it doesn't even mention a SAT at all. It doesn't even use that word at all. So it's just really bad there. Like if you don't even have the right terminology for a question like this, it's not really going to be the right answer ever. So I'd also eliminate B. C. Water sometimes moves from one end of a lake to the other and back again. A motion scientists call it sight if the lake is large enough. So this is actually a lot better. I'd say this probably does answer the defining a sight part, so it does define it, but it doesn't really explain how it forms. It doesn't really say how this happened. It just says what it is. It doesn't really say how a sight essentially is created or caused. So it could be okay. I'll leave it in there now, but probably not it. And finally, we have D. A sight is a standing wave in an enclosed or partially enclosed body of water that can be triggered in large lakes when strong winds push water toward one end. Okay, so that definitely does both things. It defines a sight. It says a sight is a standing wave. It also describes how it forms. It says it can be triggered when strong winds push water toward one end. So between C and D, D is definitely the right one. And as you'll notice here, I did not need to read the notes at all to answer this question. If I was to read the notes, it would just be wasting my time at that point because it doesn't have any useful information in there. Pause the video now and see if you can solve this question, and then I'll solve it for you as well. Okay, so step one, the student wants to highlight George Eastman's role in making photography more accessible. So we're trying to say here, how did George Eastman essentially make it so more people did photography? So this could look like maybe he made cameras more cheap, maybe he made more education available on photography, something like that, but something in terms of how he made it usable by more people essentially. So that's what we're looking for. Now we just look at the choices. So early photography relied on daguerreotypes, a process introduced in 1839. So again, similar thing as for B on this question, it doesn't even mention George Eastman at all. We really need to know what we're dealing with for this to be a correct answer, so A cannot be right. Daguerreotypes produce clear pictures but demanded lengthy exposure times. Same problem from A, we don't know what George Eastman did as a part of this. You don't know what his role would be in this, so not right. C, this looks a little bit better. George Eastman's 1888 Kodak camera, which used roll film, made photography affordable and accessible to amateurs. Okay, this looks pretty good here. We say George Eastman, what he did, which is make the Kodak camera, and it made photography more accessible and affordable. So yeah, it does the thing. So C definitely looks right here, but I would definitely check on D just to make sure, because again, we're looking for the best choice. So if D is a little bit better than C, even though C is strong, we'd have to go for D. D. Many technical innovations, including the invention of photography, occurred in the 19th century. Okay, same problem as for A and B. No mention of George Eastman at all here, so D would have to be wrong. So you're probably noticing what's really happening in a lot of these questions. It's like if they omit one really important detail, or if they focus on the wrong detail, that's typically enough to eliminate or just not really go for an answer choice. So keep that in mind as you're looking through these ones. It may be a little bit hard to wrap your head around it at first, but you're just trying to see, does it include all the things the question was asking for? If yes, it's probably the right answer. If no, probably eliminate it. Let's try this one. This one's going to be a little bit harder, so pause the video, see if you can solve it, and then we'll go to it. So the student wants to explain how the QGIS project funds its software development. So think about what this is really saying. You may not really think about this much because you're probably a student who doesn't really think about funding stuff that often, I'll say, but basically, it's saying here, how does QGIS get money for its software development? So there are many different ways you could get money here. I guess you could, steal it, but they're probably not going to be doing that. It's probably going to be something in terms of how they're getting money from people. Maybe they provide some service and they get money from it. Maybe they get some kind of loan out. I don't know. So something in terms of how they're getting money. Then we look at the choices. Because QGIS is free to download on multiple operating systems, the project relies on sales of add-on plugins to support its core developers. Okay, so this actually does look fairly strong, like sales of add-on plugins. So that's essentially saying how they might be getting stuff for the core developers, like your sales that gives us money, etc. So that could definitely work. B, core QGIS development is coordinated by QGIS.org, a nonprofit association that funds the work through sustaining memberships and donations. Okay, so that also looks pretty good as well. So A and B both pretty strong so far. C, started in 2002 by Gary Sherman, QGIS now runs on Windows, macOS, and Linux and offers more than 800 community-developed plugins. That does not mention anything about how they're getting money for their stuff. It just says what they do, so I would not say that's a good answer. QGIS is a free and open source program with hundreds of plugins created by volunteers, and its core development is coordinated by QGIS.org. So, okay, it says here that it is created by volunteers. So not really anything about money here. It says it's a free and open source thing. So it doesn't really mention anything about how they're getting money in choice D, so definitely doesn't seem good as well. So we're between A and B here, and this is really a point where there was nothing separating A versus B. I look at A, it seems pretty strong. I look at B, it looks pretty strong as well. And there's not like any kind of big brain thing I can really look at here, because like typically it's just going to be, you know, if they're close together, probably they're both strong answer choices. So the way to separate them at this point is typically you're going to now do step 3, which is look at the notes and see if there's some kind of problem with one of them. A really big thing that often happens is that they actually might use incorrect information in one of the choices. So they might actually be saying something in here that's actually just not correct. So you have to check the notes to understand this better. As for reading the notes, I would say while you can, and while it's probably the best idea to read them very carefully and try to really understand them, in actuality, you more just kind of need to skim them and see which one just answers the question you're looking for. If it's something really complicated, then yes, do actually read it more carefully, but this is the one time I'm going to give you the actual freedom to, you know, skim over something, not really read it that carefully. This was the one time, so I guess use it. QGIS is a free and open source thing. Okay, so it began in 2002, yeah, runs on Windows. Okay, the software has a plugin ecosystem more than 800. Okay, same thing here, is coordinated by QGIS. Okay, we have one more note. Hopefully this is the note that gives us the right answer. So it funds development through sustaining memberships and donations. Okay, so that is the two things we're looking for. We look at this here. So the relies on sales of add-on plugins. Okay, that is not what it says. Nothing in here talks about add-on plugins. Yeah, they don't even use that word. I mean, yeah, they say 800 community developed plugins, but that's not how they're getting money for their thing. We're looking for how they're getting money for their operations. So sales of add-on plugins, not it. So we're going to have to go for B because it says here staying memberships and donations. That's exactly right. So yes, B would be the right answer here. As a reminder, only do step 3 when it really is feeling complicated. But I will say this is something that they're bringing on more and more SATs, you know, like the May SAT, the March SAT, both of them, I'm pretty sure from what I remember, had questions on it that had you look at the notes for at least one question. So, you know, definitely be okay with doing this. It's not going to be some kind of niche thing. It probably will show up on your next SAT. So just be okay with it, but don't be doing it for every single question. Now, I just want to give you one really hard final challenge to end this video off. Pause the video and see if you can figure out this one. I'll be honest, this one is like a very hard problem, so it may be a little bit difficult to figure out. You may get it wrong for this one, but give it your best shot. Okay, so the student wants to explain that y'all helps solve an ambiguity created by you in standard written English and to briefly note where y'all originates. So they're trying to say why y'all is useful, why it like solves an issue in English, and also we want to explain where y'all came from, which will probably be the Southern United States, just based off of my own personal experience. So 2, let's see which one does these things, which one explains the problem that it solves and also where it came from. So you can be, in standard written English, you can be singular or plural, but y'all from the Southern United States. Okay, that does the second part, it says where it's from. Signals a clear second person plural, reducing ambiguity. Okay, so also, yeah, reducing ambiguity. So A seems pretty solid so far. In standard written English, you can be singular or plural. In the Southern United States, speakers developed y'all and sometimes all y'all to address groups more emphatically. So there's a couple problems here. First of all, it mentions all y'all. And I know this may be like a niche thing based off what this passage is saying, but it only asks here about y'all. Like it just really wants to focus on y'all and where that originated from. So first of all, it's kind of like an unnecessary piece of information. Second thing, it doesn't really mention the ambiguity here. It says we're trying to find a place where it solves an ambiguity. It just says why it was useful. It doesn't actually explain where there was an ambiguity being solved. We need to be looking for something where like it was super unclear and then y'all just like made it fixed, like made it better essentially. So I could theoretically keep this in, but I think I actually will just kind of remove it because if anything, A is definitely better than B. So I mean, if I'm between A and B, I'm definitely going to go for A. So I might as well just get rid of it automatically. Because you can refer to one person or many in standard written English, many dialects use y'all as a distinct second person plural pronoun to make group address clearer. Can you identify the wrong part about this? Well, probably the easiest thing we can say is that it doesn't say anything about where y'all came from. It doesn't mention the Southern United States or anything, so that would be wrong for that reason. Finally, we're down to D. Linguists say distinct second person plural can reduce ambiguity. Okay, so reduce ambiguity, we have that there. Y'all, which originated in Southern United States, serves that purpose and is sometimes expanded to all y'all. So this is really tricky at this point. I probably will look at the notes now. So we look at the notes, in standard written English, you can refer to either one person or more than one person. Y'all is a second person plural pronoun. Linguists note that having a distinct second person plural form can reduce ambiguity. It originates in Southern United States and they use, so really, I'm not seeing anything in the notes either for this one to help me distinguish between them because both of these do mention correct information. They're both right. So the United States, it says they can have reduced ambiguity, all these things. But I would definitely go for A over B here for 2 reasons. First of all, the all y'all thing is kind of important because it really does only mention y'all here. This one also mentions all y'all. Second important thing though is this really important detail they list here. It says it's an ambiguity created by you in standard written English. D does not mention the word you at all. It just says it can reduce ambiguity. So we need to specifically tie it back to the word you for it to be the right answer, so D would also be wrong for that reason. So I think hopefully what you can see from this video is that there's a bunch of different situations that can appear for these student notes questions, but ultimately the most important thing you have to understand is that this can only come from actual practice. After you get the strategy down, you just have to use it a bunch of times and really see these kinds of different examples that can show up. There's nothing I can really explain in this video that's going to get you perfect on these questions, to be honest. However, it is genuinely important to get really good on these questions because I've talked to many students before in my programs who were really good at everything else in reading and writing, but just struggled a bit in student notes questions, and they actually sometimes lost points, or at least we think it was from the student notes. They lost points on real SATs. So don't let that be you. You don't want to have a perfect reading and writing module and just lose some points on student notes in the end and end up getting like a 750 when you could have been getting an 800. That'd be really bad. You'd hate if that happened. So make sure to actually understand these questions and be able to get good at the strategy. And speaking of which, if you want to get better at the strategy, check out Mission 1400 Plus with the link in the description. We actually give you access to over 28,000 practice questions through the software Onico in here, and it's actually unbelievable how good it is. You can get a bunch of really good student notes questions that are going to test you on all the different stuff from this video, including those different times when it has stuff in the notes that's just incorrect based off the choices. So this is going to be one of the best things for you improving your performance on these question types, I will say. If you want to check it out, check the link in the description. But anyways, I'm John. Good luck in the SAT, and make sure to always stay Gucci.